Welcome everyone to our special Lammas Lunasa quiz. This is Mark from Archeo Soup, who is going to join us for our very special, very short quiz today about the holidays of Lunasa and Lammas. Are they the same thing? Are they ancient pagan? Are they Christian? We're going to find out.
What are they?
What
Um,
are they? Do you
what are they?
not
I'm
do you not
fascinated. No,
do you
no,
not know at all?
no. I
Well,
have
we're
things to learn,
oh. Well, you
and I
might lose.
suspect reading to do.
There is That is a truity of life. There is
Yeah,
always further reading,
yeah. The
whether
axiom of
you've
life.
won or not. Okay, so let's
Hmm.
begin by asking the question.
Okay.
Uh, when is Lammas celebrated? Is it the same time as Lunasa?
I, I'm not being. I'm not. I'm not trying to be funny on the first one here. But is it to do with lambs? No, no, of course not. So I've no idea.
No. No, that was actually a question
No.
two. So question two was, what does lammas mean? And it has absolutely nothing to do with lambs. Lambing season is much earlier in the year,
Yeah.
and it's not a misspelling of Lammas, which some people unfortunately thought so. Also, Feast of Saint Agatha in January blesses the lambs. That's a big feast of lambs, but no, Lammas has nothing to do with lambs. Lammas is a shortening of Loafmas. It's the
Oh.
first ears of corn that would be ceremonially reaped and baked into loaves. And it was the festival that opened the autumn season. August 1st, opened the
Right.
autumn season. And is all about corn reaping and one of the most important harvests of the year. Around Europe, the first crop would be reaped around now
Uh-huh.
and offered. And the name Lammas comes from the Old English Halfmas. Apologies for
Nice.
my pronunciation. Meaning loafmas. That's it. So, with regard to when Lammas is celebrated, it's not always August 1st. Some traditions of Lammas, and especially nowadays, place it the Sunday before the 1st,
Right. Yeah.
whereas
No, that makes sense.
Lunasa is August 1st always.
So how is it spelled?
Lammas, Lammas. The Old English
Interesting.
is Hlafmaesse.
Okay. Okay.
And so
Interesting.
obviously through Liditian over time, it got shortened to Lammas. Sort of
And
like,
one
so,
more.
so think of
What?
something like
So
Michaelmas or Christmas, that kind of thing.
okay. Yeah. 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 Michaelmas is, yes, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
What were you going to
So what?
ask?
Well, this is more of a nerdy thing. I don't know
Uh-huh.
if it's actually pure. It's not etymology really, but is it at all connected to the idea of lembas bread?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. As far as I know, the answer is no.
No, I'm
Um,
presuming not. But yeah.
no, because the professor got his sources a little bit differently. I mean, obviously he took a lot from Welsh.
Yeah.
He borrowed, but he obviously he was an Old English scholar as well. So as far as I
Mm,
understand, lembas bread is like the word is not related. I'll have to
okay.
get back to you on that 100%, but I don't think so, no.
Okay. Okay.
I think it was something that he invented because it is an elf invention.
Yes.
And somebody actually, speaking of elves, somebody yesterday had asked me when elves got pointy ears, because if you'll notice in Lord of the Rings, Tolkien doesn't mention it.
No.
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 So we'll
Mm.
we'll we'll give that a go. We'll do why elves have pointy ears and why orcs are green. So speaking of that, Mark, now that we've gone through the first iteration, we've gotten your first wrong.
Yeah.
Is Lammas an ancient pagan holiday?
I will say, I will say, we don't know.
Oh, very good. Very good. Because very good. Excellent. Top marks on that one. We have no idea. It is an old feast, but how old is actually debated.
Yeah.
Bede, very honestly, does not mention it in the Reckoning of Time at all as a dramatic thing.
No.
But
Mm.
it does appear in Anglo-Saxon Chronicle explicitly in 921 as the Feast of the First Fruits. But like I say,
Right.
it is curious that Bede doesn't mention it at all, because usually you can check his work with against the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So
Hmm.
it is kind of sketchy that he doesn't mention it. The same name and title are echoed in an earlier English text, which is the Red Book of Derby. And in Anglo-Saxon England, Lammas was the name for the first day of August, like we said, as described in Old English literature. But it's just mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It was probably, we said it was probably the days when loaves were baked of the first wheat harvest and they were blessed at church because it is loaf mass, right?
Mm, mm.
But again, whether that Christian aspect to it goes back to something earlier, it's really debated. The loaves are thought to have been used as a protective ritual, sort of an apotropaic kind of charm.
Hmm.
A book of Anglo-Saxon.
That's a good word, isn't it?
Oh, I love
Apotropaic.
that word. Love that
Yeah.
word. I love that word.
Apotropaic. Yes.
Yes. A book of Anglo-Saxon charms directed that the lambless loaf be broken into four parts, which were then placed at the four corners of the barn to protect the grain.
Okay.
So it might have just been a time for charms. They might not have started out as a Christian feast. We don't really know.
Mm.
Clark of Oxford's.
Or spirits just don't like the crust.
Well, the crust is for the knockers in Cornwall. That's what you give them. Do you know that?
Ah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I do. Yes, I do know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So for a
Toss them over your
little.
shoulder.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Mm,
yeah, so a little bit of Cornish folklore mythology. When you
mm,
eat your pasty, the people in the mines used to eat the pasty, and then the crust was saved for the knockers, and you would throw
mm,
it over your shoulder, and it would go down the shaft, and it was considered
mm.
to be a little charm or a little sacrifice to the knockers who were looking after the miners. Yeah. Um, with regard to these loaves, though, Clark of Oxford states similarly, our few references to lammas are from fairly late Anglo-Saxon texts and
Mm.
survive in Christian context. Lammas doesn't regularly appear in Anglo-Saxon calendars or even liturgical books, where August 1st is mentioned instead as the feast of St. Peter. So
Okay.
we
Yeah.
don't know. The
So,
earliest the earliest mention to this might be
uh
the English Martyrology, probably dating to 9th century, which doesn't use the name Lammas, but refers to August 1st as a day of Hausanunga. Sorry if I pronounced that correctly, meaning the blessing of the bread. And this
right.
word senyun, which is related to the verb senyan, meaning to make the sign of the cross.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Nothing to do with Dragon Ball. Um.
I wish.
So exactly. Super Saiyan. So can I just explain? So the reason why I said we don't know is because compared to say previous episodes where we fairly quickly identified that if you're a fully agrarian society and you're not
Mhm.
producing much in the way of excess, you don't have time in the winter, for example, to have a feast at a certain point, perhaps, or whenever. But baking your first loaf, I think, could be something which is quite old. Because it makes sense. You've just got the harvest. You've just produced this new loaf. If nothing else, if nothing else, you want to sort of show it around, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
110%. Yeah, all the farming families coming together and baking something
yeah,
together as a
mm,
celebration, 100%, yeah.
yeah,
There are, so speaking of other traditions, there are farming traditions of first feasts
mm,
in agrarian societies. As for other
mm,
parts of Europe, people claim that that this was a Slavic pagan holiday called.
mm,
So sorry for my Polish. Donjiki, sorry if I pronounce that correctly, but there is no evidence. There's no pre-Christian evidence for this,
no, no. Okay.
unfortunately. So
Hmm.
we just don't know. I do think I agree with you, but I think it's possible that it was just a farming tradition, and that since we used to be a mainly agrarian society,
Mm,
obviously before the world wars, and we're not anymore,
mm,
that it was just something that, because don't forget, I mean, during the summer there aren't that many holidays anyway because many people are working, so
no, yeah.
this was a time to celebrate
Fruits of your
the
labor.
yeah, the labor,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, there were
Mm,
other holidays that we'll get to eventually. There's Harvest Home in England, there's also Feast of First Fruits, all that kind of stuff.
mm,
But this was specifically like the first harvesting of the corn or the wheat, and that was extremely important. If you didn't get this in, you were kind of screwed the whole year. Okay,
yeah.
next question. Is there any evidence for celebration across the Celtic world
Sorry, celebration in general, or of this.
of this?
Okay, of this. I'm gonna say that. Okay, I won't sit on the fence. I'm gonna say no.
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you.
Okay, okay, okay.
I'll accept that. While
Yeah.
some scholars thought this was a pan-Celtic holiday, it looks like Lammas in general, talking about specifically Lammas, it's
Mm.
not. In Welsh,
Although pan, bread, connection.
yes, that's very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
The day is known as Callan August. Sorry, Mark, if I pronounced that correctly, but it was originally
Right.
a Latin term meaning the
Yeah.
calends of August. What's the
Yeah.
Welsh? What's the Welsh word for August? Did I say it right?
It's oust.
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 Sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
I gave it an extra vowel.
It's okay.
Um, in Breton, the day is known as Guliost, Feast of August.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. So, but
Yeah.
these borrowings from Lammas, these are borrowings from either Lammas or Lunasa. As well, there were other non-pagan holidays at this time, like I said, like the Feast of Saint Peter and even Saint Alphonsus.
Mm.
So in terms of like a pan-British Celtic kind of thing, there's really no
No.
evidence for it.
No. No.
Sorry.
No.
So, Mark, next question.
Okay.
Then, what is Lunasa celebrating?
Uh, Harvest Moon.
The game?
Which actually Stardew Valley is a pretty good follow-up,
Oh,
to
it's
be fair.
cracking. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, is it? Yeah, is it like a lunar cycle linked with harvest? Ah,
No,
okay, okay, yeah, fair enough.
no, it's
Okay,
just celebrating the first of autumn. Lunasa is the name for the month of August, obviously, in the Gaelic calendar. Uh,
right.
there was also an idea that this had something to do with death rites and that the word might have originated from nos, death,
Okay.
or rather, or Nusa, but it's all, or it also celebrated the Tailteann Games, which were sort of
Mm-hmm.
like the ancient Irish Olympics.
Mm.
And the event was held during the last fortnight of July and culminated with the celebration of Lunasa, or the eve of Lunasa.
Okay.
And
Okay.
honestly, despite what modern advertising claims, because there's a lot, the Irish Tourist Board is very bad with this. So despite what they claim, they have no idea how old the games are. But we do
Yeah.
know that the games were certainly held between the 6th and 9th century AD. And after the 9th century, it was celebrated irregularly and then gradually just died out. But the games did include the long jump, the high jump, running, spear throwing, fighting contests, archery, wrestling, swimming, chariot, horse racing. They also included competitions in strategy, singing, dancing, storytelling. There were craft competitions, goldsmithing, jewelers, weavers, armorers. In later medieval times, the games were revived and they were called the Tailteann Fair,
Mm-hmm.
consisting of strength skills, horse racing, religious celebrations, and traditional time for couples to do hand fasting or marriage. And Tailteann marriages were legal up until the 13th century. But that is
Interesting.
it is the first of autumn, and it was a time for people to come together and celebrate games. That's what they did. Um,
Sounds good. Sounds very pleasant. Although I know no esports.
you know what though? You could incorporate, like I said, you could incorporate the modern one. Get was it Travel Hayden on the phone and
Yeah.
ask and tell them, we need to step it up for the 21st
Yeah.
century. We
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need the
Yeah.
esports in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, or throw in everything, throw in the cosplay
Yeah.
outfits, throw in all the
Yeah.
competition. Why not? I mean, if you're just going to have a gathering of competition, that's a craft, right? Cosplay is crafting. You have to craft all those
Exactly. Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
especially if it honored armorers, well, it's kind of the same modern day sort of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So why not? Ren Fair does it. If Ren Fair does it, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Irish Tourist Board, they do have the games now, but obviously they're not in the same place and they're a pale imitation of what they used to be.
Yeah.
But like we
Yeah.
said, we only have evidence for their being celebrated on Lunasa from the 6th to 9th century. Beyond that, we don't know how long far back it went,
No.
and it
No.
did die out after 9th century. So, um, next question.
Okay.
Did the Celts worship Lu on Lunasa?
Given what you've just said,
You learned so nicely, Mark.
I will say no.
Correct. Well, we don't. Yeah, we don't know. We have no idea.
Oh, okay, we don't know.
But I give it to you because the answer really should be no, because we have no clue. We can only conjecture that there was something to do with Lugh about this day, and it
Hmm.
might have just been a story that was tied to the games, and that's about it.
Okay.
Um, uh, his being, whether he was important or venerated as part of the day, possibly. But
Hmm.
we know there were bull sacrifices that were offered for the game, but they're not tied to his name. And
Hmm.
his mother is the one who seems to be more likely to be venerated. Tailteann is said to have died of exhaustion after clearing the plains of Ireland for agriculture. That's in one of the stories.
Wow.
Lugh established a harvest and festival and funeral games in her honor. Bull sacrifices, as we said, Lunasa at this time were recorded as late as 18th century. So it's very, very recent that we've lost
Yeah.
this thing. But it was in her name and not his. Um, Whether or not the holiday really had anything to do with Lugh, our good old buddy Professor Hutton says that Lughnasadh, even though it's the named after Lugh, and he's one of the most prominent deities in early Irish medieval literature. I mean, it does feature his name does feature in texts. Um, it does his name does appear to be traditional with regard to the
Hmm.
day, but it's the only major that would make it the only major Irish feast to be named after a known deity. Some people argue that Beltane is named after Bel, but the Irish didn't really talk about Bel. That's more of a continental thing.
Hmm.
He goes on to state it's by no means obvious why this should be associated with Lugh, who was neither the god of the harvest nor the god of the sun. And he was, though, the patron of human skills. And he was associated with a lot of old Irish kings and heroes, but that's all we got. The Moira McNeill, who is the preeminent scholar for Lunasa, says that the general theme for the holiday is a struggle between the harvest and the gods. So one god being Crom Cruach, or now Cromda, in later folklore, and the other god being Lugh, who takes the harvest for mankind. Sometimes the struggle is portrayed over a woman named Inya, who represents the grain, but
Hmm.
again, that's only in certain stories. Lugh also fights and defeats a figure representing blight in some of the stories. Um, and it is kind of odd that this should be named after him, but then there's no evidence of any worship of him in terms of like actual sacrifice, and why
Hmm.
all these other characters are linked to the holiday, but not him.
No, and as you say, if there's a connection with the name of the month already, then
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But in lieu of another explanation.
Ah!
Oh, oh. I'm so sorry. I was just waiting for you to stop talking.
Only the
Oh,
finest jokes on this program. So,
oh dear. Okay.
Professor Roland Hutton goes on to say, it is worth posing the question of why not a single one of the hundreds of other dedications to gods found in what was Roman Gaul, or any of the recovered from the former Celtic provinces of Britain, Germania, etc., refers to Lugh at all.
Yeah.
And like I
Mm.
said, he goes on to mention like the prefix of like Lugh and Bel, and maybe that they had more to do with the language and less to do with the god. There were ancient rituals that were dedicated to him, like the solemn cutting of the first corn. But that's it. We don't really
Mm.
have. I mean, they talk about a feast of flesh. They talk about a ritual dance
Hmm.
that was done again to represent the struggle. Um, but I'll be honest with you, I'm very skeptical that this was ever a religious holiday.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
holiday is about, as we said, the holiday is really about Lugh's mother, Tailteann,
Mm.
whom the games were named after.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
as well, Dinchenechas, the place name, the history of the place names, says that this day was associated with the goddess Carmen, whom Lugh had imprisoned in a grove. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Dinchenechas 483 says that Lugh had four wives, Echtach, Eglich, Bui and Nas. Nas, again, remember the death that we talked about, that it might have been representing of death. So maybe it was between Lunas, maybe it was the two of them that were represented. My general conclusion is that I don't think the holiday was really for any one god, and not even Lu. I think that it was the games that were the major celebration, and all
Mm,
the Lu stories just got adopted onto later.
mm, mm. And the thing is, we have to be careful here, don't we? Because it's really tempting to see, and this happens all the time in
Mhm.
interpretations of prehistoric archaeology, where you see things that line up nicely in the landscape or in terms of the time of the year, or uh, even just figurative things, as you say, invoking death, for example,
Mhm.
can be very powerful. And you might even go, oh well, the corn has been grown and now we are ritually killing it for, you can make a lot up, I guess is what I'm saying, if you're not
Mhm.
careful. So this is why I guess this is what the value of saying we don't know is it leaves other discussion with a playing field on which to develop, as opposed to simply having to wade through all of the, well, so and so has speculated that this rhymes with that, and therefore it must be, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
I just did a whole video about the Celtic, quote unquote, Celtic tree astrology, the Celtic tree calendar, which I have heard about since, I was a kid, and it just never made any sense as to where anybody gets this information from. And so somebody asked about it because we did a video about Vegvisir and how
Hmm.
that's not an ancient symbol either. That's modern Icelandic.
Yeah.
And you'll see Vegvisir on all Viking everything, and it's not even it was
Yeah.
invented in 1846. It's in the whole manuscript.
Hmm.
It's it's Christian mysticism. It has nothing to do with runes, nothing. It's an Icelandic stave. And so somebody asked about the Celtic. I had asked Professor Ronald Hutton about the Celtic tree of life, which is how a lot of this started. And he just laughed and said, I'd never heard of it. And so I discovered, of course, that it was actually invented by a Welsh woman in 1989. And so then, of course, if you do a little bit of more looking into this whole idea of like Celtic trees and all that stuff, you'll realize that it's all nonsense. And a lot of
Hmm.
it comes from the White Goddess, which was invented by Robert Graves, who in 1948, beginning in 1946, and then published in 1948, he decided to just completely invent this whole tree calendar, which was not based on the ancient Celtic calendar. It's not based on the Coligny calendar, nothing. He just made it up. He said, oh, the Druids must have worshipped the moon, so I'm just going to change this, and then I'm going to make an astrology calendar out of this. And he used the letters of the Ogham, or Ogham, you can pronounce it both ways, to make this calendar. And it has never been used by Druids, invented in
Yeah.
1948. And it's just very upsetting and disappointing that
Well, that's what I'm getting from you, is disappointment, because
yes,
I wasn't
I'm
sure
not
if this.
not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Exactly. I wasn't sure if this was going to be like a green man. I was going to be like, do it, go on,
I already did.
unleash
It's already
your
up.
anger. But no, but you're not. This isn't a green man situation. You just seem to be like, well, no, it's obviously it's 1989, for goodness sake. Like,
Yeah, the Celtic Tree of Life
um,
is pretty bad because
yeah,
many every jeweler from here to Connemara has now taken up this idea. And it's a nice idea. And listen, humans
mm,
invent things all the time.
yeah,
That's the whole point of this series, is to see how human invention how it becomes ritual, right? And how it
hmm,
becomes
hmm,
how it turns into festivals, and then how people think things are thousands of years old when really, they're 40 years old or something like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
really kind of the whole point of this, is to investigate and really find out the answers.
mm,
And so it's fine if jewelers want to use this Celtic Tree of Life design. I love it. I have a Celtic Tree of Life piece. I think it's a very nice design. I'm under no mistake, however, and no illusions that it is not
no.
ancient in the slightest at
So
all.
would you go around the jewelers taking out the little piece of paper that comes with each one that says, according to some, you're like, no, no.
There is an Irish tourist board that claims the tree came from Yggdrasil, and I just went, I need to phone you, and we need to have a
Yeah,
discussion because you
yeah,
can't be You can't be talking about this and as an educational piece and telling people that has nothing to do with, like, not even that, but I mean, I've heard things like, oh, Christmas trees were originally from Yggdrasil. Oh, like, back up the truck. Vikings never worshipped trees. We need
Yeah,
to, yeah, And then
yeah.
people try to link it with the Druids, where no, Druids would never cut down a tree. So again, it's
Mm,
this whole like people supposing and then going, oh, as you just said before, it must have been that because it looks
mm,
like that. And you realize, no, actually, there's a much simpler answer, and it's just
no.
that somebody invented it or made it up. And we even have,
Yeah.
especially when we have the record for that, you know, and there's
And
no
yet,
excuse.
but and yet it's very attractive, isn't it? It's very
Hmm.
attractive and very um it's accessibly exciting in that sense of research to go, oh, here's a correlation, and like yesterday I was watching a short uh exploration of Terrence Howard, the actor,
Hmm.
who apparently has reinvented maths according to him. One times one equals two, according to him, and that's the basis of his premise for a universe changing paradigm. And the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson gave him the respect of actually going through his 36-page thesis and just uh, not pulling it apart, but highlighting where actually this is flawed, this is false. I appreciate your passion at this point. This artwork that you've produced, or this pattern is beautiful, but it's not proving what you think it's proving. And
Yeah, the paper
um,
severely misrepresents just basic physics. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But the point is though is that it feels good. It feels exciting to do that, and a little bit like the book that I sent you a little while ago. Um, yeah, yeah, the book. It's I remember looking in that book and being excited about, and I thought I was the difference between cumulative synthesis of ideas resulting in hypotheses that you then go out and prove or disprove, compared to, I guess, remembering a lot of stuff and finding interesting correlations can be difficult to fully grasp, I think. And so as a kid, I found that book rich and exciting, and I felt like I was
It's
in a
still not
library
bad for a
discovering
book that
things.
was published in the 70s and has a
Yeah,
little bit of
79,
old
I think. Yeah.
information. Really still not bad. A couple things
Yeah.
off, but very impressive. But you can
Yeah. So,
tell the care that went
yeah.
into the research behind the book.
Yeah. But yeah, the book. But because I think it's because you're being exposed personally to something new. You feel as though this is research, which it is technically. That's what academics do. But also, there's an aspect of this whole process that we've just been talking about, where you also have the context to weigh and measure what you're reading, and to see whether or not there's a statistical or cultural or whatever significance to the assertion that comes next.
And that's why whenever we do these exposes, I always give the sources because I think
Hmm.
it's for educational value. It is important to offer that to people. I was watching, I think it's the mythological podcast, and where all of them, I knew the answer, but they were trying to look for the origin of the wild hunt, and
Okay.
the answer is that it was made up by Jacob Grimm. That's the answer. And a
Okay.
lot of people try to find where he came up with this idea. Was it an early Germanic concept? Is it an early Slavic concept? Now there
Hmm.
are ideas of like winter. There's even in Irish mythology, there's the concept of the Kayach and her like coming through winter, etc. So there is that aspect of winter as personified by a retinue or personified
Hmm.
by spirits or something and coming through. But there was no one. So you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, Odin was the leader
Yeah.
of the wild hunt." You just go, that never
No.
says so in the sagas, and that doesn't exist. That comes from a painting that
Hmm.
somebody made based on Jacob Grimm's assertion that Odin
Hmm.
was the leader of the wild hunt. And that's where people start to confuse things. And that's where it leads today. I mean, really, we all know Geralt is the leader of the wild hunt,
I
before.
I was going to say, yeah, I was
And then of course the Elven King is the leader of the wild hunt. But that's the whole point, is that now it's become, even though Jacob Grimm made it up, and even though it was based on an earlier ancient principle that was unnamed, It's now become in modern folklore. And that's
Mm,
fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, to create your own folklore and then incorporate it into your own media. It's like the
mm,
concept of
mm.
orcs, right? I mean, Orcus goes all the way back to the Etruscan underworld.
Right.
But when they invented Orcus, I don't think they ever thought that we would be talking about little green men that we paint and
With the
wear.
tusks. Yeah.
Yeah, they would never. I don't think they would have thought of that. That
No,
wouldn't have entered
no.
their mind. So it's fine to incorporate something into
Mm,
your modern folklore or your regional celebrations. There's nothing
mm,
like, it's like Ren fairs adopting pirates. Totally fine. No, nobody cares. It's part of the atmosphere. But
mm.
then don't say pirates were part of the Renaissance when we know I mean, obviously there was always, hijinks on the seas, but what are the idea of like the golden age of sail was not the same time period
No,
at all.
no,
Yeah,
no.
so it's the same thing with these things. If you want to say that possibly Lou had something to do with Lunasa, but we're not sure what it is. Maybe it's just the like you said, it's just the historical aspect of the games that were named
Mm.
after. That's fine, but we really don't know a lot of these things. We don't know, and oftentimes when we do find evidence, it's kind of contrary to what we might hope.
Not to reveal yet again my my diseased pun brain.
Right.
Uh but but um I think there's an aspect here of people not liking loose ends in that sense. Uh, and this I I know I tried to say it as non offensively as possible. Um, I conceded. No, uh, but no, people don't like a loose end, and they much rather have something which is nicely tied off. And I think
I love
that
loose ends because I mean that's where
yeah,
historical fiction come in. But you have to respect that it's fiction and not
yeah,
accept that everything that Dan Brown writes about is fact. You know what I
no,
mean? If
no.
he's going to write about the Knights Templar and about people worshiping Baphomet, fine. But we know that that didn't happen. So it's okay if you write it in a historical fiction context.
I didn't get that far because I couldn't get past his grammar. Isn't he meant to be an English professor?
Let's not, Mark. Let's not.
Like, anyway,
Let's
sorry,
go
yeah,
on to
yeah,
let's forget about the horrors of
yeah.
Dan Brown,
Okay,
and let's
yeah.
go on to the bonus question.
Woohoo!
Bonus question. What
Okay,
are
so this is a biggie because we're both at 3-3.
uh,
So yeah, also it should be Franklin Sensei, shouldn't it? Not Sensei Franklin. Sorry.
what are the dog days of summer, and what do these festivals have to do with them?
I have heard this word or this phrase. Um, I have no idea. But it makes me think and feel of something which is kind of nostalgic, kind of no, no, I have no idea. Like,
I was just going to let you go with that one. I'm trying not to make faces.
no, 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 no.
Do you
But
want
the
would you
moment you moved your face, like,
would you like to take an inventive guess as to
okay,
why they're called the dog days of summer?
okay. Uh, Dogs don't live as long as us, and so they're short. No, okay, no, I don't. I have
No,
no
no,
idea.
I like that one. I like that one though. That's a great one. But no, no, that is a good one though. The dog days of summer are is when the dog star Sirius is in the sky.
Oh, of course, yeah, okay.
And it's important because these days in general, dog days were thought to bring about misfortune. In 1878, Frances Kilvert wrote that she was ill due to the dog star. It is
Right.
true that farmers at this time of year were afraid of blight, disease, pests. High summer is rife with problems.
Yeah.
Plague, ague or malaria, it started at this time. Lice, ticks are rampant at this time of year. And much like the fires of Beltane in midsummer and other sympathetic magic, corn dollies and like baking sacrificial loaves and charms to ward off disease and ill luck, like we said, apotropaic charms, is important. The most interesting Anglo-Saxon reference to any of this, Lammas and in general, is appears in a ritual and intended to protect harvested corn from mice. And the manuscript is in the British Library.
Hmm.
Cotton Velitus E. XVIII, is it's a psalter
Okay.
written in a monastery at Winchester in the middle decades of the 11th century. It says, take two long pieces of four-edged wood, and on each piece write a paternoster on each side down to the end. Lay one on the floor of the barn, lay the other across it, so they form the sign of the cross. Take four pieces of the hallowed bread, which is blessed on Lammas Day, which is August 1st, and crumble them at the corners of the barn. This is the blessing for that, so that mice do not harm the sheaves. Say prayers over the sheaves and do not cease from saying them. City of Jerusalem, where mice do not live, that's not true. They cannot have power. They cannot gather grain nor rejoice with the harvest. And then there's a second blessing. It says, Almighty God, who made earth, bless these fruits in the name of the Father and the Holy Spirit, and then say the Paternoster. So it's just that this might have been a general time of
Mm,
year where disease was likely to strike,
yeah.
especially plague. I mean, all the plagues began in the summer. So
Yeah.
people were panicked about it. And it makes sense. I mean, if you're working hard and you have many bodies together doing hard labor, you would be extremely worried. So Mark,
Yeah.
how'd you do? Did you
Uh,
did you
nah,
win?
you won. You won.
Ah,
Because there was technically the second question, wasn't there? Of what does it
yes.
mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, you get the big extra point uh for Sensei Franklin. Franklin.
So
No, that was
for
that was
punishment,
interesting.
Mark,
Uh-huh.
you get further reading.
Yay! Okay. Uh-huh.
So for
What's on the menu?
for further reading, a Celtic Culture, a historical encyclopedia by John Koch, or
You have to
Koch.
read the whole thing?
No, you have pages 1201 to 1202.
Oh,
So
that's not too bad. Okay.
those are the two pages that have to do with Lunas. The Acer Oxford blog, A Little History of Lammas, Brendan Noble's discussion of Slavic harvest festivals,
Mhm.
and of course, um, there is a whole episode about Lammas and fiery festivals on the English Heritage podcast that I recommend people listen to because it's very fun. And like we said, there are other harvests that are coming later. There's Harvest Home, Michaelmas,
Mhm.
and the dreaded Mabon, which we will talk about with regard to Thanksgiving. Oh, don't worry, Mark. If you go, that sounds like a Welsh word, but it doesn't mean anything, you are absolutely
Yeah.
correct.
Well, yeah. 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 Okay, interesting.
We will give you that one already because oh boy, let me tell you, Mabon is a big doozy.